Hello, happy Thursday. Hope everyone's having a great day so far. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're at. So we're back. Took a week off. Well, not really a week off. We didn't do the live stream last week because we were live at Tableau conference, which was a great time. And so, as Sarah and I were just talking in the chat, I have just about recovered. So my voice is finally, my vocal fry is finally starting to subside, and I'm back. I think I've finally caught up in my sleep, which is really nice. So, so today I'm excited to present this challenge to the community and walk through it with all of you. So we're going to be talking about Trellis charts, which are a really awesome chart type that I really enjoy using. As I mentioned in the introduction, if we kind of go through here, we'll do. So we've got we're going to do some Trellis charts, and as I mentioned in here, a Trellis chart is a way of doing a small multiple with just one dimension. So small multiples are really good if you have 2 dimensions or more that you want to display information, but sometimes we want to do so with just one dimension as opposed to showing everything on rows or everything in columns. We kind of want to do both, and it's a really good way to show a lot of information in kind of a compact display. So that's what we're going to do today. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So first thing we need to do is connect to our data. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already got this pulled up here. And we're using the week 2 data set from Back to Viz Basics, which is great. So if you're not familiar with Back to Viz Basics, it's run by Eric Balash from Lovelytics, and it's basically kind of a way to get back to, as the name suggests, get back to basics, right? So it's a bi-weekly, so every other week, and you kind of just, he presents a chart type or some sort of a basic data visualization foundation and a data set, and your job is to recreate that with using that data set and that prompt. So it's a good time. So if you haven't checked that out, please do so. Just check it out, the hashtag B2VB on Twitter, or you can just Google Back to Viz Basics and be able to get there. All right, so first thing that we need to do after connecting to our data is I have a few filter requirements, right? So we're only looking at 2012 and beyond. So I'm going to go ahead and add a data source filter. I could do it on the sheet, but a good practice, best practice is if it's going to be you're going to take it off the top, might as well just do a data source filter. That way you don't have to worry about context filters and level of detail calculations and all that kind of fun stuff. So we'll go ahead and do a data source filter on date, and we'll do years, and it's going to be coming in discrete. So we'll just do this here. So we're getting all of our 2012 and beyond. We're going to keep those. And then the other thing that we need to do, if you took a look at this data set, is we need to, the gender has all in it. So it's kind of it's got the grand totals in it, as well as it separates out by men and women. So you want to make sure that we are only selecting all. Otherwise, things can get kind of muddy with aggregations and all that kind of fun stuff. So now that we've got our filters set, we are ready to go. So the Trellis chart, there are multiple ways of doing it and doing a quick Google search. If we just did that, Tableau Trellis chart, right? So there are a number of, you've got, so there's a video by Andy Kriebel in here. The folks at Tessellation and PH Data have a blog. We've also got Playfair Data. We've got one from the Data School. We got some Vizent, so that's Lindsay Betzendahl. So lots of different blogs to follow. The one that I typically use a lot is the one by Playfair Data. So shout out to Ryan Sleeper and his team at Playfair Data for writing this together, which is really good. So he just walks through how he built a trellis map with a trellis chart with a bunch of maps. But the most important thing is he's got the calculations for rows and columns, right? And this is really what you need. And even in here, he even linked to another post from Chris Love at the Information Lab on how to build a trellis chart. So there is, just like many other chart types and techniques and tips and tricks in Tableau, there are a number of different things to follow, right? There's always multiple ways of doing the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this calculation, go back into Tableau, and this is our columns calculation. Some people do X and Y. I typically do columns and rows because it's easier for me to understand which one goes which, because it's written on the shelf, right? It's written right up here. So if I know that this is called columns, I know to put it on the column shelf. So that's what I'll do. So we'll leave it there. We'll do that. We'll create a new calculated field. We'll call this row. And we'll take this and we'll do that. Now again, he doesn't go through how this all works. But obviously in Chris's blog post, they go through all of these. But in a similar, in a quick way of thinking about it, if we look at the columns, we'll start with columns, right? And we'll kind of break this up, right? So index, right? So index, we're going to basically be counting the number of rows for within a partition, right? And so we're numbering the rows. We're going to offset that by 1. And then we're going to and then this modulo function means we only take the remainder. And we take the remainder of the square root of the total size. Again, lots of weird math. You don't really have to it helps to understand what it is and what's happening. But basically what we need to do in here is we need to take country name and we'll drop it onto the detail shelf. And of course Tableau thinks, oh, you want to make a map. So here's your latitude and longitude. Well, thanks Tableau, but no thanks. So here we go, and so we've got 36. And the really great thing about this chart and why I really enjoyed it is because the number of countries is a perfect square, right? So there's 36 marks. That's a 6 by 6 square. So it's going to look really nice, right? So if we go back to Ryan's, right, whenever he did this, right, he had a 5 by a 4 by 4, but he's got 1 left over, right? So with ours being a perfect square, it's going to have a nice quadrant in it, and every single square is going to be full. So that's what we're going to do. And now the other thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your rows and columns calculations are both discrete. So I'm going to control click or shift click both of them, and I'm just going to right click and convert to discrete, and then we're just going to put them out there. And you can see here, it's not doing that doing that thing that I want it to, right? It's just doing into a 1 by 1 square. And the reason for that is because we're using table calculations and we have not set the proper partition and compute using for these table calculations. So let's go do that. And because what it does, Tableau says, oh, you want to do table across because that's what I do by default. But actually what we want to do is and the table calculation that we're doing is the index function, right? The index and the size functions. That's where the table calculations are coming into play. And we want it to compute those calculations based on the country name. So now you can see here, as soon as I did that to columns, it broke it out into 5 columns. Whenever I do the same thing to rows, it will break it out. And now we've got a nice 6 by 6. Now remember, when you're indexing, indexes start at 0, so that's why you only see 5, but you have to account for the 0, so we have a 6 by 6. Let's go ahead and make this entire view. All right, now what we need to do is, from there, let's go ahead and build our chart here. So what we're going to do first, I'm going to change this to continuous, just so it's already there. And then I'm going to do the continuous month, right? So you can kind of see, let's see, can I do that? Yeah, so you can kind of see here, hopefully, you can see here that these up here are blue calendars, whereas these down here are continuous calendars. So this just helps, again, green and blue, discrete continuous, all right? So just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're doing, whenever you've got this context menu. And the reason, and the way that I did that, you noticed, is I held down the Alt key on Windows and Mac. Hold down the Alt key and drag out the pill that you want, and that's how you can get that context menu. All right. So also, if you have a traditional mouse, it's actually right-click drag, which is kind of a weird thing, but you can right-click and drag it out to the view and get the same thing. So again, lots of different ways to do things. All right, so we're going to do continuous month because that's the grain of our data. And right now it says, oh, you want to do a bar chart. Actually, we're going to go ahead and force this to be a line chart. Things look weird right now. We'll fix that in a minute. Actually, before we do that, let's fix that now. So we've added a new dimension into our view. And currently, we have these index and size. So we've changed the level of detail in our view, which means we're going to... So if we take this off, again, let's use the functionality of Tableau, right? And you can see here we've got 36 marks, which is 6 rows by 6 columns, right? Now, let's go drag. Let's do that same thing. Let's drag date onto columns. Let's do continuous month and watch what happens to our number of marks, right? It increases to 4,212, right? So that's what we need to make sure that we do. We need to make sure that we're getting, we need to make sure that we account for that in our table calculations. So we've changed the level of detail within our view, and we need to account for that in our table calculations. And the way that we're going to do that is, let's see. Yes. Okay. So there's two ways. So we can do it by country name. We can do it by month name. And we do it here. So what's happening, you can see here that when I did country name and I unchecked country name and I just did it by month, you can see that it separates everybody out, right? But we still have this connecting line here, and that's because we have to do the exact same thing for that, for rows. So we'll go ahead and do edit calculation here, and we'll just flip this around. And that didn't work. So what That didn't work either. For each country, restart each country. Nope. So this is where kind of the table calculations kind of, you kind of have to play around with it until you get it exactly the way that you want it. Restart every country. Nope. Okay, so let's think about this. What are we trying to do? Instead of just clicking around and getting to what we want, what are we trying to do? Well, what we want to do is we want to have one within each quadrant, right? Within each size and index, we want to index each month for each quarter, or for each country, right? So if we go here and we edit our table calculation, and we do this again, all right, so let's see what I did here. We'll go here. We'll sign in to Tableau Public. No. Yeah, I didn't think so. Nope. All right, so let's do this. So instead of me fumbling around for the right way to set up these table calculations, I'm actually going to, yeah, we'll update that. There we go. Just go in here. This is the one I created. Again, no shame in peeking behind the covers, right? So if you ever have to do this, it's okay. All right, so we've got here. Nope, stay there. Whoop. Now things are looking really weird. Here we go. This, edit table calculation. How do we set this up? All right, country. All right, for each month, check country. All right, so for each, right? Yeah. There we go. And it's going to be the same way for this one. Okay, and it still doesn't look right. But what happens if we put unemployment rate here? There we go. I just needed to add a measure. Good gracious. See? This is the fun part. So it's kind of like when you do measure names and measure values sometimes and it gets all wonky. So I just added a measure and now it's all fixed. So hooray, hurrah, I fixed it. All right. Sometimes you just gotta go through it. But so now let's take a figure. Let's now that we've figured it out, let's go back. Let's reverse engineer and let's figure out what we're doing. So for each month date, right? That's what this is saying. So for each month date, let's count the yeah. So every country, let's count the number of months. That's what this is doing. You can see here. So, all right. Now, but we don't want to use unemployment rate. We actually want to, this is where things kind of get interesting. So, if we look at we'll go back. So what we're doing is we're showing the monthly unemployment variance from the monthly median rate. So what that means is we need to create a calculation that calculates the overall monthly median rate for each country, right? Because what you can see here is everything's kind of on a different scale. So what I'd like to do is kind of create basically showing an index calculation, right? So it's showing the difference for each month, what the difference is from the overall median. So what we'll do here is we'll do a calculated field, and the way we're going to do that is we'll say this is the monthly median rate. And what we need to do, instead, we can't just do median of unemployment rate, because that's going to give us across everybody. So what we actually need to do is we need to make this a window median of the sum of unemployment rate. So sum, so let's look at inside. Sum is basically what is this value for each country. What is the value, right? And we know that because that's what's on our rows right now. So we have the sum of unemployment rate, and that's just for each country and month. What is that rate? The window median says, okay, let's take all of this. Let's take all of these points and find the median. That's what this calculation is doing. So that's the monthly median rate. So then whenever we say what is the variance, what's the monthly unemployment rate variance from the median value? So that's going to be another calculated field, and this is going to be the rate variance. And I'll bump this up so you can see it. It's just going to be the sum of unemployment rate minus the monthly median rate. So remember, the sum of unemployment rate is just the individual values that you see here. And we're going to take each one of those individual ones, and we're going to calculate this across across the monthly median. Okay, so we'll say okay, and we know, and we can check ourselves to make sure that this is working by if we were to put this on, we put this as a dual axis just for now, just for the sake of showing what's happening. You can see here that the lines are at different values, right? And the way that we know that that's working is because we've set it up in such a way that this value is being duplicated across each row. And that is what's going to allow us the ability to take the value of this row, of this unemployment rate, minus that. And that's why we need the window. That's why we need the window function. So if we just tried to do the median of unemployment rate, that would not be the same across all the rows. It would be different across each row. And so when we tried to do the variance calculation, that's what we would get something fouled up. So now we'll take the rate variance and we'll now just replace it on that. And now what you can see, what that did is it put everything, right? It created this 0, right? So now you're able to see how many, which points of which countries are above or below that median rate, right? So we're basically normalizing all of the values across all the countries and months to 0, right? So we're putting everything on the same scale. That's kind of what this is. This is what it allows us to do. All right, so we are pretty close, right? So we've got the lines, right? So now we need to figure out how to go about figuring out what to do about how do we do the labeling, right? This is where things get real fun. So this is a trick that I learned, I can't remember, way back several years ago. Why is that? There we go. All right. What I want to do is, there's multiple ways of. I wish that there was an easier way to add labels to a Trellis chart, right? Unfortunately, there's not. So we kind of have to hack it. a little bit. So the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to call this the label value. And essentially what it's going to be is there's a little bit of guessing that has to go on, right? So what I'm going to do first, to figure out the calculation, what I want to do is I want to put a value, I want to put the label right in the middle. So we have to create a mark in order for us to do custom labeling. And in order for us to find the middle, there's a couple different ways that we could do it. One, we could just take, okay, so we started at 2012, we went to 2021, we know that that's 9 years, and we would just take half of 9, which is 4.5, right? And then you could do, but because we're doing every month, right? So our partition of each month is whatever the 9 times 12 is. 72, does that sound right? Let's see. 117, right? So there's 117 marks within each quadrant, right? So the way that I like to do it is because I also like to be as dynamic as possible, meaning if new data comes in or old data leaves or something like that, if we do any filtering, it'll always work. It'll always be centered. So that means we can't hard code anything. So the way that I do it is it's going to be an if statement. Well, the way to find the middle is basically the index equals size divided by 2. So index, we're going to count each one starting at 0. We're going to count each row. Well, we're going to start. It's and then, right? That's going to be the first part. That's the index. The size is just what is the total number of rows within that partition, which is 117. 117 divided by 2 is some fraction, right? So what we have to do, either way, one, you could just change this into an int, right? So if we did this, watch what happens, right? So if we do this, let's just leave it like this. So then to finish out this calculation, we'll do if that equals that. Then what value are we going to return? We need to pick some value up above here. So we'll do, just for now, we'll do 20. See what that looks like. Click apply. I'm going to click apply because I don't want to lose, because I think we're going to have to do some finagling here. So that's why I'm going to keep this open. But by clicking apply, it allows me to continue to click and drag out here. So that's a fun tip if you've never done this before. If you're kind of new to Tableau and didn't know you could do that, you can keep the calculated field window open while you do things in your view. So it's a really nice way, especially if you're like validating your calculations. This can be a really good thing to do. All right. So you can see here, I added this here, and you can see it did not create a mark, right? There's no marks here, right? And the reason for that is because this calculation ends up being a fraction. This calculation is an integer. So we've got things going on here, right? So what are we going to do about that? Well, that's why we wrap this in an int to make it an integer. We could do round, we could do flooring, we could do floor or ceiling, or there's any number of ways to do it. But now when we click OK, you can see it adds a mark right there. And I think that's a good place to start for right now. So now we'll go ahead and make this a dual axis. Synchronize, always synchronize. I wonder what Tableau's reason was for not having synchronized axes by default when you do a dual axis. That's one thing I've never understood. It'd be super cool, although it would be a little bit of a there's so many people who use Tableau that they just know to always do that they would probably get confused if they were to change it. So anyway, all right. So we've synchronized. Now we can not show our header, which is good. But now we have this label here, right? And now that we have this mark, we get our whole new marks card here that we can then do whatever we want with. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take measure names off of color, because Tableau tried to do that for us and it's not really what we want. It is a line chart. We can change this to a circle to make them real. And then what we'll do is we'll drop the size down as small as we can get it, itty bitty little tiny thing. And then to even get rid of it even further, we'll go ahead and drop the opacity here down to 0. All right, so it's there. It's really small, can't see it, but because it's still there, I still have the ability. We're also going to go ahead and get rid of the nulls. I still have the ability to create labels off of this. So now what I'm going to do real quick is you'll notice I had on here all caps for the country name. So we need to go ahead and create that calculation. So let's create that. Create calculated field. We'll call this country label. And we're just going to wrap this in an upper, right? So paying homage, shout out to Ann Jackson, who was a previous Workout Wednesday coach. Loved capitalizing all of her labels. So we're going to click OK here. And then I don't want to necessarily just drag this onto label. And I'll show you why. If I do this, I'm going to drag this onto label and show my labels. Allow to overlap. There we go. All right, so there it is. So you can see how all of them are on one thing. All of them are on this upper right quadrant. The reason for that is because we've added a new dimension into our table calculations, into our original rows and columns Trellis table calculations, right? So we would have to go back and we would have to redefine our table calculations in order to get this correct. But there's a trick. I now don't need country label, so I'm going to take that off. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace my country name. I'm going to replace all references within my workbook from country name to country label, because it's the exact same thing, just uppercased. By doing that, it takes the place of all of my table calculations where country code or country name was, and replaces it with country label. So now, instead of it being on the detail shelf, I can just change this to be on the label. And voila. Just like that. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's see. So that's why table calculations can be kind of tricky, and why I think a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy them, is because of all of the really finicky, how finicky they can be. But with a little bit of learning and a little bit of workouts, you can be a little bit more comfortable with them. All right, so let's go ahead. Well, let's do some cleanup while I'm thinking about it. We'll take off our labels for our rows and columns because we don't really need them. I'm not going to need them in the tooltip. I'm also not going to need my title for my Y axis, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. All right, and now what we need to do is we need to create the calculations for the overall median, the overall min, and the overall max. All right, so that's just we've already created that. That's just a monthly median rate. So on our label, we'll just add that to text. And also, while we're here, we'll go ahead and change our default formatting to number 1 decimal place, and these are percentages. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, and then we'll go ahead. Here's another trick. if you're going to be creating additional calculations that are just variations of what you've already created, right? So I could come here and I could create a new calculated field, and I could do window min or whatever, right? Whatever I wanted, right? But that would be a new calculated field, and it would have different default properties. So if you think about all the things, we changed the number format, and I want to keep that number format the same across all of my new values. So if you copy or if you duplicate this and then go in here and just change this from window median to window min, and then change this to the window min rate, or the monthly min rate. And then now that I duplicated that, when I duplicated it, it also brought the formatting with it, right? So now when I drop monthly min on label, it's going to have the exact same formatting as before. And so then I can come in here and I can just duplicate this one. Again, these are just different ways to work smarter, not harder, right? So we'll do the window max, or the monthly max rate. And this is just going to be a window max function. Just like that. And then we'll drop this on label as well. And then we'll go into our text shelf. And we'll do, have you ever noticed this too? So you go in here, right? Well, I'll cancel this. So this currently, right now, on the mark is country, median, min, max. When I go into text and I edit the text, look at the way that you would think it would not be a far stretch to say that that is the way that they would be labeled whenever I click this edit text right here, right? In fact, they're all over the place. They are flipped, right? Which is interesting. And then, so you would think that that this would be the same way that they would be on here, but they're not. So what we got to do is we got to drag all this stuff around. Monthly max rate is going to be on this side. The monthly median rate is going to be over here, and we'll drop that down, and we'll bring this and we'll center this. It'd be really cool if it was just in the right order, but again, little things. So then we can do, I think we did for this, we did like a Tableau medium 9, and I think we did these as all 8. I think that's what I did. And oh yeah, and then it also continues to have these empty lines right there, so we'll get rid of those empty lines, and then we'll do, what did I call them? Yeah, overall median. And then I did range. Is that what I called it? Yeah, range. Right there. Added space dash space. Let's click. Let's see what that looks like. Australia, overall median range. There we go. That looks good to me. And there we go. Right? And now we just got do a little bit of formatting here. We're going to format the line to be pretty small. Maybe not that small. And we need to drop the color down, something like that. All right. And what else? All right, Tim's got a question here. We'll do, let's see. So instead of the index for label, can we also create a placeholder like average of 15 and synchronize the axis on the country label? Yes. So you could do that. You could also, so yes, so the label value, so what he's saying is we could do something instead of that. we could just say, so if you just do average of 15, here's why that won't necessarily work, because what that will do is, if you do, here, we'll duplicate this. We'll get rid of this. Or no, we'll edit. We'll keep that, but we'll do this. We'll do average 15, which would essentially be the same thing. So as you can see, it kind of, things get wonky, right? Because you can see here, what it's doing is it's doing an average of 15. It's putting a mark at 15 in every single square. But the reason that it but then all of these are overlapping each other, right? Because we've got if we do, yeah. Oh, okay, let's do that. So yeah, so we can do that. So that we're there. We're quite there. We're not quite there yet, right? So we said now don't allow labels to overlap, right? So we've got everything on here, but now what's happening is every single one is every single mark, because we've duplicated. Because if I increase the size of the circles and I bring back opacity, you'll see that every single mark on 15 has a mark on it, and we're trying to update that. Now, by doing that, by increasing the size, you can see we dropped it down to one label for each one, but now they're not really centered, and so it'd be really hard to get that over to where we need it to be. So that's why we went with this, which does, it finds the middle, and then we just, now, I mentioned earlier I want it to be as dynamic as possible, right? Well, what happens if 15 or 20, that's where an actual mark is, right? So you could make this dynamic too, and it could be the window, it could be the monthly median rate times some multiplier to get it up above that, right? We could go ahead and do that. Let's because that's what I like to do. I like to think about things and then do it. So we'll just try 1.5, right? And that added it there because of, now what we would need to do is, for that we would need to come here and do this as well. And that doesn't work. So then you just kind of have to play around with it again to kind of get it to where you want it. But so could it be done? Yes. Could it be done in the time that I want to continue spending? No, but you could get more dynamic. You could get more dynamic with that that label formula, so that even as new data comes in or goes out, this label would adjust accordingly for every value. So, or for every partition. So now what we need to do is we need to finish up a little bit of formatting. So let's format this worksheet here. We'll go here and we'll get rid of all of our grid lines. We'll keep the 0 lines. Excellent. So John says he likes my method better. Love it. That's good. So that's good. I didn't realize that I'm not. You can't hardly see my head. I just looked up and saw that. Anyway, all right. So the next thing, what do we need to do here? Oh yes. So the next thing that I want to do is I would like to have, so you see how my axes here are go all the way up to 20. So if we edit our axis here, you can see that these aren't the same, right? So that is one thing that we need to, that I would like to fix. Do we have to? No, but it is going to do a nice job to kind of get that in the center. So what we could do is we could just do fixed, and we could just copy this and just do a negative of that, right? So now what happened is we've got some overlapping of our labels. So we'll go in here to our label value and we'll just bump that up just another hair. And because we cleared our axis, we also need to do this again. So again, it's a trial and error type of thing, right? There we go. That's a little better. Is it necessary? That's debatable, but it does kind of make everything fit whenever you get it onto a dashboard. Okay, so the next thing, while we're going here and formatting, we'll go here and we will get rid of our row dividers like that. But what I'm going to do for my column dividers, as opposed to just getting rid of them, I still want them to be there because I want to actually separate, because if I get rid of them, you're going to see that the 0 dashed line is connected all the way across. And what I'd really like is just a little bit of separation, just to let the reader know that this is the end, here's the beginning. And the way that we can do that is we'll go ahead and keep our we'll keep our column dividers, but what we'll do is we'll make them really, really, really big, right? And we'll drop the color to white, right? So that's the good thing to remember about column divider. And now you can kind of see it. I'll get my zoomer here. You can see now how there's a little bit of space, just a tiny little bit, right? And that tiny little bit is good for, we talk about negative space in data visualization, and some people call it white space, but I call it negative space because sometimes you can have a dark dashboard and then it's black space. So just call it negative space, and then everybody knows what we're talking about. So that little bit of negative space is going to be really helpful to the eye. Be like, okay, that's the end. It's not like I've got missing data or anything like that. This is the end, right? So that's what I like to do that. But the way to remember, because I kind of fuddled with this until it kind of dawned on me, is dividers, right? So these dividers are always on top, right? Then behind the dividers are the grid lines, right? So dividers on top, then grid lines. Actually, if you want to get technical about it, reference lines are next, right? So it goes dividers, reference lines, then grid lines. So grid lines are all the way at the very back, right? So whenever you're creating your dashboards, maybe that'll help you figure that out. So the other thing that I did is I added a reference line here. So I like that, again, adding space, adding negative space. So I feel like these lines are really close together, right? It's really, it feels kind of cramped. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to give each quadrant its own space. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a reference band for the entire table. And this is where you get to set a min and max. So what I'm going to do is for each month date, I'm going to do a constant. And this is 1/12/12 or 1/1/12, and I'm just going to do 1/1/11. I'm just going to go back an entire year and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go constant on this side, and I'm going to add a year. So we're going to go here, and we're going to do that. All right, and then we can get rid of our fill. We'll get rid of our values. We'll get rid of our tooltips. Get rid of our value. Get rid of your tooltip. Right? So we're just we're making space out of nothing. All right? So now, as you can see, now there's a little bit more space between each object next to each other. So now the next thing we'll do is we'll get rid of our month axis, or a month axis title, because we don't need that. All right. And now, whenever we throw it onto a dashboard, what did we do for the dashboard size? There we go. Dashboard size 13 by 11. There. Now we'll just throw this guy on here. Just like that. And now we just need to add a title, add our footer, and we're good to go. So there you go. So that's how we make a Trellis chart, and that's kind of all the formatting that goes into it. Now, was that a lot of formatting? Yes, but our other options available to us, if we had not built a Trellis chart, either we'd have each country on its own row, and so it'd be really, really long, or we'd have each country on its own column, and it would be, we would have horizontal scrolling, or we'd have a really, really wide dashboard, which really wouldn't work. So Trellis charts are a great way to take a single dimension, squash it down. There are a ton of excellent examples, better examples than this one, out on Tableau Public. So go out there, search for Trellis charts, and I'm pretty sure you'll find some really great examples of how you can do this. So it doesn't have to be a line chart, could be a bar chart, could be a lot of different things. But yeah, that's it. So thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it. And give me a like, give me a subscribe, give me a follow, give me a share. And we will talk to you all next week. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you all later. Go forth and viz.